are in chapter 3. We're starting chapter 3, and we'll quickly go through the next 4 chapters. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Teshuvah shlishit was the third type of teshuvah. So we said the 3 aspects that later we'll see are, the Tzemach Tzedek added that there are 3 that are 4, really, because the third one is really divided into 2. Even though you've finished the first 2 aspects of refraining from evil and doing good. There's a third level which is greater, and that's encapsulated by the verse, return to me and I'll return to you. What does it mean, return to me? פירוש, כמו שנדבר במקום אחר, בפירוש כל ימיו בתשובה. דן רוצה לומר על עבירות חס ושלום, ואם כן מהו כל ימיו, אלא התשובה היא על הריחוק. So he says the third aspect of tshuva is about your distance from God. It's not about what you did or didn't do. It's about psychologically. Where are you holding? Are you close to God or far away from God?
Obviously, if you were close to God, you wouldn't do an Avera.
Maybe, but it's another thing. It could be that the third level would supplant the first 2. That if you were able to, but usually the person doesn't function that way. Rather, there are levels that we do Averas. But Kol Yamav B'Tshuva means every single day of my life I do tshuva. How can you do tshuva every single day of your life? Once you did tshuva, it's finished. So what are you doing the tshuva over? You can't continue doing tshuva. So what does it mean taking it up? So he says, really, in essence, what it means is that you're always distant from Hashem. Why are you always distant from Hashem? Because as close as you get, you're still distant. How do you know that you're on the right path? That you feel distant. And that's a famous thing. If you don't feel distant, you're in trouble. If you feel, that's the premise of all of the Noam Elimelech. We talked about Rebbe Elimelech of Lizhansk. His whole book is based on it's called the Book of Tzaddikim. Right? The same way that Tanya is called the Book of Beinonim, the intermediates, or the in-betweeners, as Chaim Miller calls it. Very nice name. So, there's also the Book of Tzaddikim, there's also the Book of Rishaim. The wicked. The wicked is Likutei Moharan, right? It's Reb Nachman. Reb Nachman talks to people who they need to hear a lot of praise. This is the only thing that's going to lift him up. Intermediates, he needs to get a reality check. Okay? Tanya gives you a reality check. You thought you're a tzaddik, you're not a tzaddik. You're in between. But Noam Elimelech, he talks about being a tzaddik. What does it mean to be a tzaddik? He says the main quality of a tzaddik is that he always feels distant from Hashem. Okay? So this is already talking about being a tzaddik. A tzaddik is somebody who is all his days in tshuva. And the famous story from the Rasag that we're not going to repeat now. Then it's from Rav Sadia Gaon. The Baal Shem Tov was a Gilgul of Rav Sadia Gaon. Rav Sadia Gaon was also the one who said there are no Gilgulim, so it was sort of like hitting him over,
Who said you that?
Why does it smell like there's somebody burning something?
Because someone's burning gasoline.
Gasoline. Hmm?
How do you know the Baal Shem Tov was a Google and said
How do I know? He says so, and of all the Geonim, the one he mentions, he has a few dozen things that he brings from the Rav Sadia Gaon. He says his whole approach that the Ikar is working on the character, on the psychology. He says that's from Rav Sadia Gaon, because Rav Sadia Gaon writes that it's harder to change one character trait than it is to keep the entire Torah. And that's a big deal for the Baal Shem Tov. What? So it's from Rav Sadia Gaon, original. What does it mean to be distant? Hashem is not on the moon and on Mars. It's not that you don't have a spaceship that's big enough. Okay? The problem is that you feel yourself to be something. Yesh v'davar. Right? You feel yourself to be yesh v'davar. Or you are a yesh v'davar. You are something. You feel that you're something. That's the biggest problem. And that is the issue that the Alter Rebbe had with Napoleon. And people don't, this has not been written about enough. Everybody knows he had an issue. We don't know what the issue was. The issue was that he saw that the moment that this type of freedom would enter the world, even though it's a good thing in a certain sense, it's a very negative thing psychologically. It's going to put people in a state where they find it impossible to come close to God. Why? Because there's something. Because Napoleon said you're something. Okay? Because you've been told that you're something. And now everything changed. So that needs a lot more discussion, exactly what it means. But the point is that the moment that the Baal Shem Tov said, and the Alter Rebbe continued this, that in our generations this is the evil inclination, feeling that I'm something. Because the moment that I feel that I'm something, I can't come close to Hashem. That's what really separates and creates distance between man and God. וגם אפילו אהבה, even if he has love for Hashem, עדיין הוא בחינת יש מי שאוהב. There's a famous saying that even when you love God, you feel that it's you who loves God. So love, even love, is an emotion that is accompanied by a feeling of self. ועיקר תשובה הוא כמו שכתוב, הרוח תשוב אל האלוקים. And tshuva really means the return of the spirit to God. What does it mean, return to God? Does it mean you die? It means the spirit returns to be godly, and not belongs to Moshe Genut. Okay? Doesn't belong to Yaakov Katz. That's what it means. If you can't get to that, you still haven't done tshuva. דהיינו שירצה לשוב למקורו ושורשו, בחינת ישראל עליו במחשבה, והיינו שירצה להיכלל ולהידבק בעצמות אור אינסוף ברוך הוא, למעלה מבחינת מלא כל מסובב כל מין שאינו בגדר מין כלל. So the person wants to go well beyond what there is in the world. Beyond the mamala, the light that integrates, and the sovim, the light that surrounds. He wants to go beyond it, to Hashem himself. And Hashem is not limited by worlds. And again, worlds is any conceptual scheme you have. A world is your feeling of self. That's a world. Every person is an island, right? That's a Solzhenitsyn. Okay. Every person is an island. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I think he's got a book called The Gulag Archipelago. It's a group of islands somehow working together, mostly detached from one another. So anything that brings people together is going against their nature. Not against their nature, sorry, against their feeling of self. That's why it's so hard now to get people to cooperate. There's no sense of community anymore. People are battling to create community. It's the hardest thing. That's why the Rebbe worked so much on creating community, because the moment you create community, you automatically go against this nature of feeling separate. Okay? And, in Hasidic terms, it's not clear who's serving who, the shaliach or the community. In Hasidic terms, it could very well be that the people who are willing to work with the shaliach, they're serving him. They're willing to come to his, to humor him and come to Shabbos services or this or that. They're really giving him his tikkun. Because a person's tikkun is to stop thinking about himself. And that's the biggest thing that the Rebbe had, I think, trouble explaining to people. Why are you so involved with yourself? Why are you so... It doesn't matter. All these questions that you have, they don't matter. Anyway. Sorry. And that's called Amitnaseh Mimot Olam. That Hashem is above time. He's above the events of time. If you can get to what's beyond, right? That's what we keep saying. That the world of Atzilus is Ani Havaya Lo Shaniti. There's no change there. It's above time. It's not temporal. And that was the purpose of the parting of the Red Sea, to go beyond Havaya, until your nation passes over even Havaya. Because what did we say Havaya? Havaya, we said, was the Soviv, right? He has a short way to mnemonic to remember this whole mimer, which he repeated many times. It's Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu. Right? Elokeinu, we said, that's the first level of teshuvah. Havaya, that's the second level of teshuvah. I said the first and second are like Memala and Soviv. And now he's going to say that the third level is Ata. It's to go to you, without the worlds. So that's called here going beyond Havaya. Okay? Or Lifnei Hashem Titaru, same idea. That you go beyond the name Havaya. Here Havaya, again, is not the substance of Hashem, it's just the, what we call the light that surrounds all worlds. כי שם הוויה יוד חוכמה ונקרא סובב כל עלמין. We said, בקריאת ים סוף היה גילוי מלמעלה מעלה מבחינת סובב כל עלמין, שעל ידי הפך ים ליבשה, שם ודתקסיה בא בהתגליה ממש. So there has to be something that's higher, because the surrounding light is like the sea, and the integrating light is like the dry land. And the reason being that the dry land you can integrate, you can come in contact with, you understand it. And the sea is hidden, it's concealed like the surrounding light. But in the parting of the Red Sea, the sea became dry land. So there must be something that's above the two of them. Right? And the something that's above the two of them, that's what we're talking about here. Lemala mishem Havaya, above the name Havaya. This is the third level of teshuvah. Okay, anyway, all this is very nice. As I'm skipping one paragraph, V'nei teshuvah zo hi el b'chinat Torah. So practically speaking, the way you do this is by connecting the Torah. Until now, it was mitzvos. So we had notas and we had a say. We had the prohibitive and the prescriptive. Those are the first two levels of teshuvah. The third level of teshuvah is about Torah. Why? What is about Torah? One might say maybe the Torah is just the mitzvos. What's the difference? No, because the Torah nikra meshal kadmuni. Again, shehi mashal ulevush libchinat kadmono shel olam. The famous pasuk in Shmuel. We've seen this pasuk, and it says that basically the entire Torah is a parable. What's it a parable for? It's a parable for God. And that's like the source of saying that that the Torah and Hashem are one thing. That the Torah is like a garment for the Almighty. Except, as we said many times, that the garment here is a very special garment. Usually a garment conceals. Here the garment concentrates. Okay?
It doesn't reveal.
In that way it reveals. Meaning it's not like the regular garments. When you do a mitzvah, what does he say in Tanya? It's like you're hugging the king, but you're hugging the garments. The king is inside. Okay, so it's like you're touching. It's like you're holding the king. That's by a mitzvah, because a mitzvah, relatively speaking, is external. Even though we said this chiddush a few days ago. We had this chiddush that in the mitzvah itself, there's two ways to do it. There's the one way that's like surrounding light, and one way that's like integrated light. But in general, the mitzvah is considered to be surrounding light, because it's like a garment; it surrounds the body. But this garment here is special. That every mashal is a garment, every parable is a garment. So the Torah as a whole is a garment for Hashem in such a way that it's not concealing him, but rather holding him. It's like a different type of garment. There's garments like a box that you shake it, and here's a little tiny thing inside. That's like a mitzvah. Okay.
I don't understand that. Say that again.
Like a box, somebody brought you a present,
Okay.
and it's all wrapping.
Okay.
Until you get to the final, the present was very, very small inside. That's like a mitzvah. I'm trying to give it an example. Okay? That you're holding the box, so you're holding what's inside. But to say you're really holding what's inside, there's a big separation between what you're doing and what's inside. Okay? That's like a mitzvah. But in Torah, it's the other way. It's not like that. It's like sometimes you have to put a covering in order to hold something together. Okay? For instance, you have a sack of rice and it's bursting. So the garment is not. You can mamish get pieces of rice out through the sackcloth or whatever it is. It's bursting. You can't. The garment is just there to somehow hold it, so that it doesn't spill all over. So that's more like the Torah. The Torah is more like that, meaning that Hashem is in all his infinity is in there, and the Torah is hardly holding it in. The moment you start learning anything, your mamish, right away you feel the power of the infinite, right away after a second. And so that's the type of garment that the Torah is. And so what it means that it's very hard to say this about Torah, right? To say that the Torah is a garment, people would go nuts. But it says that, and that's how it's understood. Okay. It's like it's saying that again, for a Jew to say the Torah is only a garment for God, that's almost again, it's not heard as something positive in the beginning. As there is something negative. What do you mean? The Torah is it's the revelation of the infinite. How can you say it's just a garment? What's above that? Again, so we don't mean a garment in the sense that like a box. Again, there's a small tiny box inside, and you have to search for it. Where are you going to find godliness in this Torah? You know, the Torah is not like that at all. It's every word that you read that's godliness. So it's bursting. But it's the only way to contain it. Otherwise, if we didn't have this garment, we wouldn't be able to transport it from place to place. This rice, we can't move it one by one. There's an infinite number of grains there. And so the garment holds it together, concentrates it, makes it possible to even approach it. ולכן אמרו רז"ל, so אמרו רז"ל, כל העוסק בתורה משים שלום פעמיים שמיים, we saw this already. דהיינו שמחבר בחינת סובב וממלא. So he brings together the סובב and the ממלא. Okay. וגם שעל ידי המצוותם שחררו בחינת מקיף, אבל על ידי התורה נמשך הגילוי בבחינת פנימיות. So he says, even though mitzvos themselves are already touching the infinite at some level, like we said, it's only by Torah that it comes into your inner sense of self. Meaning, again, it's bursting, so it's about, you have immediate contact with it. On the inside, you have an immediate contact. But the mitzvah, who knows when you'll see the inner effect of a mitzvah. You may never see it. As it says in Tehillim, in chapter 40, your Torah is inside my intestines, in my innermost core. Bikirbecha kadosh. Bikirbecha kadosh in Hosea means that the Holy One is in you. How does this usually explained in Chassidus? That there are people that are alive even though they shouldn't be alive. Like you told me about stories like this. A person shouldn't be alive. He's not. He's too sick.
Oh, okay.
Why is he still alive? Not only is he still alive, he's functioning. What's going on? So it's called the Holy One is in him. The holiness is now animating him. It's not the regular nature. And so the sages said about this verse in Hosea that it's as if the holiness is inside his intestines, keeping him alive. So all that's what we're talking about, that the Torah becomes internal. So if it's physical, that's mamish a miracle. Okay? If it's psychological, it's much more accepted. We don't see it so much as a miracle, even though it might be a greater miracle. What?
A bigger miracle.
It might be a bigger miracle. It's not clear which way is a bigger miracle. But the fact that a human being would have a healthy, vibrant psychology that never gets upset, is never insulted, and only treats everybody with respect. And you have people like that. You know people like that. That's called Kadosh Shali B'Kilbo. The Rebbe was like that.
Yeah, but not many.
It's not many. That's called the Holy One is inside his intestines in the psychological realm. Okay, we're going to skip a little. We're going to skip to the end of this column. And how do you get to this level of uncovering the infinity within the Torah, uncovering the essence of Hashem, the substance of Hashem that's inside the Torah, that's bursting to come out? You do this by teshuvah. And the teshuvah here is She'osek b'Torah lishma, that you have to learn Torah for its own sake, not for any other sake, not to do a wedding. Yeah? Not to do a wedding.
Well, I'm not doing a wedding for its own sake.
What?
I'm doing a wedding in order to bring the Jew back to the right path.
Sedov.
No, I'm saying,
But when you learn, you don't need to think about
I
that.
don't want them to do mistake.
So when you learn, you don't even need to think about that.
For becoming the rabbi.
You even don't need to think about the fact that I'm helping him do tshuva. Even that's not interesting. It's for its own sake. It's because the Torah is a Shem. That's why I learn. How does this work? If you learn after davening. After davening. What you learn before davening is for one thing. Right? The Friedrich Rebbe has a mimer. Not a mimer. It's in the Yom Yom. He says the three types of learning in relation to davening. This is what you learned the day before, what you learned just before, and what you learn after. So what you learn after, it's really strange smell. It's gas.
I think it's probably because it flies. Somebody's tried to put something to keep the flies away.
You think that's what it is?
Maybe.
After you daven, your heart's open. It feels the infinite. So if you learn with that, that's called Ruta Liva. We talked about that many times. The will of the heart. So when that point of infinity is open in the heart, then you can learn. And then when you learn that way, it's not learning for the purpose of something. When you sit down to learn after you daven, there's a few minutes, one would call it in English grace. You have some chen on you. That you're not learning for the test, you're not learning for what you know.
For ulterior motive.
There's no, it's just learning for the sake of learning. It's the time that this is especially strong, and it's a pity that it's not done. I don't know why it's not done. And the Sfardim have it right with that. Is Shabbos morning after you finish davening. Before Verbrengening, even. I don't understand why it's not done. 10 minutes. Just read a mimer then. It feels completely different. After you spend 2.5 to 3 hours davening, and then you sit and you learn it together. It's the best time to learn it together. That's how the Sfardim do it. You know, they usually daven early on Shabbos. They don't have Onik Shabbos. They haven't heard about it. So they wake up at 4 a.m. to go daven in the summer, and by 7 o'clock they're finished. And then at 7 o'clock it's still, if you're in Yerushalayim, it's still nice outside. So they go sit outside, and they bring them hot cups of tea with 5 tablespoons of sugar.
What happened to Kiddush?
They do Kiddush, and then they drink hot tea, and they have a little cake. And a lot of them learn the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai or Chaim, whatever it is. Ben Ish Chai is very good because Ben Ish Chai is like a mix of everything. You've got halacha, medrash, his gematriot for the remez, and the Kabbalah. He brings everything. That's why Ben Ish Chai is it's like a Chokli Yisrael, but it's much better in and they learn this for 15 minutes together. And they say the brachos, right? Because they have this whole thing with brachos, with adding more blessings on Shabbos. So they bring all these different things, and nuts and raisins and everything. The only really good taste I had from the Sephardi world when I was young, I had this cousin who was a Makubal, and I used to go to for Shabbos, was those 15 minutes after. I couldn't stand the davening, because I was asleep. Who can be awake at 4 o'clock in the morning when they're 16, 17? You have to be nuts. You have to have problems. You awake at
How did you get out of bed?
I didn't go to bed. I think that was the only way. Because Shabbos starts late, and you're in bed by like 11, and you ate, so you can't even fall asleep. And then 4 hours later, they wake you up. So that was the hard part. But once the davening was over, and it was very hard to go through. Their davening was very monotonous for me. So, but when it was over, those 15, they did it for 30 minutes. That was the best part of the Shabbos. And then he slept the rest of the Shabbos. But what I learned from that is that this is true. That if you daven right after, if you learn right after davening, it's a completely different type of learning. It comes from a very different place, and then there's no contest. So the thing that was very easy. Everybody took turns reading, and it was fine. It wasn't. Nobody had to try to explain, or it flowed very very easily, very well. Anyway, okay. And now he says, "V'do Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu." As we said, he has this way to remember these three levels that Baruch he didn't mention, but we'll see that maybe this is the fourth level that we haven't mentioned yet. Atah is the third level, is you, meaning talking about Hashem directly. Hashem Elokeinu is the first two levels that we saw. Havaya is the surrounding light, and Elokeinu is the integrated inner light. Okay. V'nei kol gimel teshuvot anal. Skipping to chapter 4. Nikraim bechor. So he has another way to remember these. They're called bechor, firstborn. Why? Ki gimel otiyot bechor v'nichidot asirot me'ot. This is one of the words. There's a lot of segulos, this word. A lot of special attributes. Bechor is also a root. It's a three-letter root. So in this root, the three letters, each one is a multiple of 2. So bet is 2, and kaf is 20, and reish is 200. So 2, 20, 200. So these, can you have anything like this in any other? No, in any other. Is there any other such word that you have that all 4? Right? There's only one other word in Hebrew. It's like that. It's shelik. Shelik, snow. So the gimel is 3, and lamed is 30, and shin is 300. And you can't do ik. Aleph yud kuf is not a word, and midat is sort of like a word. Dalid mem taf. So it's a little bit. But it's not a root for sure. Sheleg, I don't think it's a root. I don't remember what the root might be. It might be that it is a root. I'm not sure. In any case, this one's special because it's also according to the order. You say gulashes. What? That's maybe the smell where it smells. They came to see what. Anyway, what's special about this? We know that in numbers, each number represents each multiple of 10 represents a different world. So the units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they represent the world of action usually. Tens are the world of formation. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Anything that's 10 to the first, all the way to 100. Friend, and 10 to the second already, that's the world of creation. 10 to the third is the world of emanation, of Atzilus. And 10 to the fourth, which is in Hebrew a special word, it's not a special word in English, but in Hebrew there's a special word for it. There's a few other languages in the world that have this. Ribo means 10,000. So that's from the world of Ak, from Adam Kadmon. Right? That's the Keter. So you have here the first 3 levels, and what does he say now? They're really these 3 tshuvas. They correspond to the world of action, formation, and creation. In the world of action, you do tshuva on the prohibitive acts that you do. In formation, it's already about what you missed out in what you didn't do a prescriptive mitzvah. You refrained. So that the effect is not in the world of action. The effect is already in the world of emotions, of psychology. It affects the angels. And again, we talked a lot about what it does for the angels. The angels are mostly in the world of formation. And then the Torah is already the world of creation. That's the intellect. So it's a nice way of remembering all this. So we'll skip this. And we'll go to page 32. And what does it say about Bechol? Where does this word appear? where does this word firstborn appear? It says וזהו קדש לי כל בכור שיוגברו שלושה עולמות ביאה שהם נרן על ידי השלושה בחינות תשובנה. Right, the second paragraph on page 32. על ידי השלושה בחינות תשובנה ויתברו משבירתם ויתעלו לעולם האצילות. So really what we're doing is we're sanctifying the firstborn. He's already hinting here that there's a fourth level, but he doesn't say it outright. But it means that to do teshuvah is to take things out of their broken state and bring them into the world of Atzilus, into the world of emanation. And that's what's called Kadesh Li Chol Bechol. It says every place it says Li, for me. Sanctify for me every firstborn. For me is, what it means is that it's everlasting. When you bring something to Hashem, what you do is you make it eternal. Okay? So what does it mean to make it eternal? Kol makom shenemar li eino zaz leolam. Every place that it says for me, it never changes. That's the world of emanation, right? Eino zaz. וזהו יפה שעה אחת בתשובה שיש יתרון לאור מן החושך שנתברר שעל ידי זה נתווסף אור ועל ג' תשובות אלו דנרן אמרו לא זז מחבבה, לא זז. Here we have the same idea. It doesn't move. It's a very interesting thing. There's a verse in Shir HaShirim that says, what's the verse? The verse is that Hashem calls us my daughter, my sister, and my mother. Pitchi li achoti rayati. No, tamati, that's different. But maybe that's the verse that the sages learned this from. What they say is that these are stages or levels of connection between the Jewish people and Hashem. And it's also the always when I talk to couples, this is one of the biggest deals that people either haven't heard about this or they're afraid to do it or not sure. But in every relationship between a man and a woman, there are multiple layers. There are different ways of relating to one another. So some men, when they hear that their wife says, you know, I have another child in the house, they're really upset. They're really upset by her saying this. They feel that she's insulted them.
I never heard anybody say that.
Really? Okay, so what would happen if your wife would say that? You don't know. You haven't tried. I have my own problems. I don't need new ones. So a lot of people have this problem that the woman feels that she has a child at home, and it's true. Men take a long time to develop. So instead of seeing it as something negative, as some kind of some reason to be embarrassed, on the contrary, you have to understand that there's an aspect that this is very holy. That she sees you as her son. She raised you. That's how a woman relates. That's how she relates to anything. She wants to raise it. She wants to make it greater than it was when she met it. And there's nothing that would, you know, she may say it as a negative thing. You act like a child. So okay, so if she's saying it now as a negative thing, so she still hasn't gotten what she wanted, because she says, if you're my child, why are you not growing up like the rest of the children? The rest of the children are growing up, you're staying the same. But okay, let's bring it out. Let's explain what it means, because people say it and they don't understand what it means. So you have to explain this part of the relationship. What does it mean that a woman wants her husband to be better than he was before, and a husband should want to be better because of his wife?
That's something else.
It's the flip side of it.
No, I'm saying
Like a child.
Looking for the children, we say, better to take a woman who's firmer than him, because she'll help him grow closer to Hashem.
But if he doesn't want to take the...
No, explain to him that that's the way it should be. We encourage them.
But when he actually hears it, what does he do with it? He gets upset. Well, most people get upset. They don't hear it because they think, what do you mean? I'm much closer than she is. I go to shul. She has no right. I learned Torah. She has no right to tell me. It becomes something of a point of
attention.
Yeah.
I never heard of
Then there's my sister. The sister is brotherly love. There has to be brotherly love between husband and wife. It's not all romantic love. It's not all physical love. It's also just my best friend. This person I enjoy being with more than anybody else. And even if it's like my brother, my brother doesn't have to be my best friend. And it could be that I don't spend so much time with my siblings, but they're the people I feel most comfortable with in the end. This is a person maybe we don't do so much together, but when we're together, we can sit on a plane for 12 hours, and it's very comfortable. We don't feel that we have to entertain each other. We don't feel that we have to do this or do that. So that's brotherly love. There's also a simple connection, and then there's that he says she's my daughter also. She's my daughter means I also have to raise her. What does it mean that I have to raise her? That my role in life is to make sure that she has everything she needs in order to develop, to become the woman she wants to be. Those are the three levels of connection. But in the Medrash, when they explain this on the verse, they start by saying, Lo zaz mechaveva, that it requires you, Hashem, here it's Hashem saying to the Jewish people. It's very interesting. Hashem says to the Jewish people, you raised me also. You made me, you treat me like your son also. You don't just treat me like your father. You treat me like your son. Your son. You're raising me. You're bringing me up. How could it be? How could Hashem be? Because tzar gidul banim. It takes time to convince Hashem that he should act this way, not act. That's what we do all day, right? We're trying to convince him. Look, the way you handled this last situation wasn't the best way. We have a better idea. Okay? That's what a tzaddik does. A tzaddik raises Hashem in that sense. He says, you said one thing and we say something else. Okay? Okay? And Hashem has to accept it. Why? Because he got into this relationship with us. It's not for free. And that's one of the things that when people hear this, if they're like very staunchly from, they hear this and they can't accept it. Right? If they're not from at all, then they can't understand it. What are you talking about? What you mean when you take Hashem to be your God, then it also means that you have to encourage him, you have to get him to do things. Okay, that's exactly what it means. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that Hashem can't do it. Of course he can. But he entrusted this to you. Okay? He entrusted you to lead the way. That's what we talk about a lot. He told Abraham, you lead the way. You, in that mashal, in that parable that Rashi brings about, what does it mean? Hitalech lefanai. Hashem said to Abraham, walk before me. He says a man has two sons, a young son and an older son. Okay. So the older son, he's Avram. He's the one who leads Hashem. Okay. So if he leads Hashem, who's leading who? Who's the parent, as it were? So it's true that the parent still remains the parent, but the older son is taking him. He's leading the way. So in that sense, he says, I trust you to lead me. I trust you to raise me in that sense, to bring me to a new place where I haven't been yet, as it were.
We shouldn't have done this at fast. We should have done it slower next week.
So we almost reached the end. The end, the fifth chapter, is he just explains that really this is Yaakov and Yisrael. The first two levels are Yaakov, Matovu Alecha Yaakov, that's how he started, and the next two levels, which he didn't mention yet, the Moichin, are Yisrael. And the sixth chapter, which is something that the Tzemach Tzedek added, I don't think it's from the Alter Rebbe himself. Here he mentions that there's actually, the third level is really two. And then he explains the two levels here of Bina and Chochmah inside the third level of Torah. Well, we didn't get a chance to get there. Next year.
Start in the middle.